To start out our coverage of the Black Grail, I thought we'd start with the demon who leads them, Beelzebub. And this vid will be going over the basic lore and a short story about the faction too, so welcome back to the trenches and let's begin. The cult of the Black Grail gives epidemics of typhus, malaria, typhoid, smallpox, yellow fever, pneumonia, trench fever, Marquesian disease and countless others that ravage the trenches and battlefields of the Great War. But they are all pale in comparison to the most dreaded of them, the Black Grail. Beezlebub, Lord of the Flies, stands apart from the other Lords of Hell, who act mainly through their mortal followers. Instead, when he periodically gains supremacy in the bitter power struggles of the Archfiends, he sends forth his deadliest curse, infused with demonic essence from the bowels of the seventh layer of Hell, where the putrid fortress of Beezlebub stands. It spews forth a torrent of demonic hell. Flies, scorpions, locusts, and other infernal insects. The Hellgate opens, and a tidal wave of foulness emerges, flowing across the land at startling speed, consuming everything and leaving indescribable horror in its wake. After 9 days, the insect swarm exhausts itself, devouring its own in its insatiable hunger. The Black Grail is indiscriminate in its hatred of all living things. Its infections can spread to virtually any living biological matter, which bursts forth with tumours, boils, and weeping pustules. Puddles and ponds of melted flesh are left in its wake, endless mouths left screaming in their agony. For the Black Grail destroys the body, but leaves the mind intact to suffer. The scientists, priests of the church, and the alchemists of the Sultanate fervently look for a way to inoculate their people against this foulest of diseases, but thus far they are without success. The only answer is to burn the infected settlements with specially constructed flamethrower tanks that use holy anointing oil as the fuel for their weapons. But if this is not done, or the countermeasures are too late, what happens next is even worse. Bodies of men, horses, dogs, insects, and other animals of every kind that the cult of the Black Grail are infected by the Grail lurch to their feet, driven by a demonic will. Not living, not dead, they become vessels to spread the corruption of their master even further, forming warbands that strive to find and infect life of any kind. They also gather things that mortals value and bring this loot, as well as grisly trophies, to the feet of the idols of Beelzebub they erect. Thus the cult of the Black Grail mocks the devotions of the faithful and their prayers. At the head of such warbands stand the Knight of the Order of the Fly, those most depraved men and women who willingly embrace the Black Grail and whose devotion Beezlebub finds sufficient. They are granted weapons, armour and equipment corrupted by the hand of the Archfiend in exchange for sacrifices brought to the altars of Beelzebub, which these warbands build wherever they go, objects of grisly horror constructed from the remains of their victims, shaped into the form of monstrous flies. Mike Franchina also told a short story on the faction, which I will tell to you now. The short story is about a conflict between the church and the Grail's worshippers. First came the Cancer Angels, dropping from the clouds and unfurling their tumorous wings to soar clumsily over the trenches, absorbing bullets and flak, until they burst and rained down unholy spirochetes and pus. The soldiers' prayers quickly changed from hymns of holy defiance to pleas for deliverance, as their flesh bubbled with afflictions, their bodies becoming breeding grounds for a wondrous panoply of plagues. As they fell and seethed with rot, their corpses bloomed into parasitic hounds that loped towards their retreating front lines, terrifying in their silence. Then came the Plague Knights in their squeaking, clanking, stinking armour. Bullets spanged off the rusted plates, holes punched through the metal, bled sewage ripe with fermented illness. When the explosive armor-piercing rounds of the sniper priests blew off limbs, the silent figures didn't even stumble. Trench pilgrims ploughed into their lines with bayonets slathered in holy oils, but the knights' huge rotten claymores hacked open their blessed armour and sowed 1,000 varieties of vermin in their meat. Behind them came hordes of resurrected corpses, some soaring out giddy dirges on instruments that once played to pass the dreadful hours waiting for whatever horrors hell was going to throw at them. None spoke or sang, even those that still had tongues. They praised the putrefactors, with the miasmas leaking from their wounds, the maggots spilling from their metastatic wounds. Shells fired from artillery miles distant exploded among their ranks. pulping hundreds and swaths of napalm dropped from martyr bombers incinerated thousands, but not even fire could cleanse the pandemics soaked deep into the earth, that not even the radiation from hallowed neutron bombs could sterilize. As the battle waned, a procession of excubitors, crowned with ticks, came tramping through the feculent mire, making way for a lord of tumours and his wheezing retina. What ground was not already infected was sprinkled with pus from his gurgling masses. A fog of engineered bacteria rose up from the boiling ground, spreading a stench that not even a mindless acolyte of the beast could stomach. The dead men, animated by demonic pestilence, began to claw at the walls of the trenches, pulling down the filthy mud, patting it down with a flat square, paved with their own bones. More lords came forth to surround the makeshift stage, anointing it with foulness. Led by torch-bearing corpses, a squad of quairistas came forth. Without a word, they took their places. With dull knives they sawed through their necks, decapitating themselves in full view of the Lord of the hosts above. Their plague-thickened blood crawled up from the rust stumps to form blasphemous sigils that rippled the air like heat with the fury of their affront. As the quairists offered down their shriveled souls to hell, a brace of naked witches, their skins whitened with chalk made of ground-up bones, formed a circle in their midst. Now came a sound, a shriek like incoming shells, or a cage full of damned souls screaming, and the familiar wet pops and crackles of flesh transforming. The witches' bodies flowered, bowels spilling out to become tentacles, bones locking them together. The air tore open, and more flesh emerged, sucked up from the deepest pit of hell. Miles distant, in their observation posts, horrified spotters fell to the ground, their brains pierced by the sight of what was forming, as if their binoculars had become pistol barrels, with a complicated scream that shredded reality and blew the grinning lord of the quairistas into clouds of flies. The horned and howling first apostle rose up, like a mushroom cloud of foulness, to preach its caustic sermons to the poisoned wasteland. So, let me know what you think to this law. I will be doing the usual with the law, covering, let's call it, the basics in a few videos, and then using that as a platform to go into deeper analysis, spotting little hints, etc., where I find them. So now I turn things over to you. Drop me a comment down below, and if you like this video on the Trench Crusade, perhaps you should try this one. I also just wanted to do an update on what I'm working on at the moment in terms of the Trench Crusade lore. So taking a look at my desktop, I've just done one on the Black Grail, I've got one on the Princes of Hell, and I've done one that's a theory about the traitor Paladin. That's also got a few other elements thrown in because it'd be a really short video otherwise. And then next up I'm going to be working on today, going to be looking at the Empire of Ethiopia, which for some reason I'm very excited to learn more about, even though there's not a great deal of lore. And in that we're also going to touch on the Ark of the Covenant, and how if that was brought into Trench Crusade, how what's within it could perhaps used in combat. And then lastly we're going to look at saints. There's a mention of a particular living saint, then we'll look at the dead saints and what happens to them afterwards, etc. I have covered that to a degree in the Council of Saints, but I'm hoping by doing a video that overall covers it, we'll get a little more insight into their role within the Trench Crusade lore. Anyway, that's it. Have a great day.